Say it. Say you support genocide. Say that flag on your chest represents murder. Say it, or we will make sure everyone knows who you are." The spit hit Margaret's cheek as the masked Antifa militant screamed inches from her face, his breath hot and rancid, his black-gloved hand gripping her wrist so tight she felt her bones grinding together. She was 73 years old, 5 feet nothing, and pinned against the hood of her own car by a man half her age who wore violence like a uniform. The small American flag pin on her collar, the one her husband David had given her 52 years ago when he came home from Vietnam, caught the afternoon sun. That tiny piece of metal, no bigger than a quarter, had become her death sentence in this parking lot. The Antifa thug was not alone. He never was. They traveled in packs like jackals, feeding off each other's manufactured rage. 2 more masked figures flanked him, both dressed head to toe in black tactical gear that made them look like they were heading to war instead of terrorizing an elderly woman buying groceries. One was recording everything on his phone, his voice a mocking sing-song as he narrated for his audience. "Look at this fascist boomer literally shaking. Look at her crying. This is what fear looks like when you finally get confronted for your complicity." The third militant, a woman with a shaved head and wild eyes visible above her black bandana, shoved a crumpled flyer into Margaret's face. "Read it. Read what your precious military does. Read about the children your husband helped murder." Margaret tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper, broken and afraid. "My husband was a good man. He saved people. He taught school for 23 years. He never hurt anyone who did not." The lead Antifa militant cut her off with a bark of laughter that sounded more like a bark from a rabid dog. "Saved people. He was a trained killer for the American Empire. That pin you are wearing? It is soaked in blood. Indigenous blood, black blood, brown blood. You are proud of that? You are proud of being a fascist's widow?" His fingers dug deeper into her wrist, and Margaret cried out, a small sound of pain that should have moved anyone, to help. But the parking lot had become a theater of cowardice. 40, maybe 50 people within sight. A young mother grabbed her toddler and practically ran toward the store entrance, head down, pretending she saw nothing. An older man loading groceries into his trunk made eye contact with Margaret for one excruciating second, saw the desperation in her eyes, and looked away so fast he nearly dropped his bags. He got in his car and drove off. A group of teenagers by a beat-up Honda were filming too, laughing, one of them shouting encouragement to the Antifa militants. "Yeah, get her. Make the Karen cry. Bet she voted for Trump twice." Nobody moved. Nobody intervened. This was the world the Antifa had created through intimidation and mob violence. A world where people were too afraid to help because they knew that phone in the militant's hand meant they could be next. One video, one screenshot, one post calling them a fascist sympathizer, and their lives would be destroyed. Jobs lost, families threatened, addresses posted online. The Antifa militant knew this. You could see it in his eyes, that intoxicated power that comes from realizing you are untouchable. He leaned in closer to Margaret, close enough that she could see the acne scars on his cheeks, the gaps in his teeth, the pathetic excuse for a beard that covered his weak chin. "You take that pin off right now, Grandma, or I post your face everywhere. Every Antifa network from here to Portland. You will be famous, a fascist icon." How does that sound? Margaret's hands were shaking so badly she could barely feel them. She reached up toward her collar, toward the pin, and the Antifa militant smiled in triumph. The woman with the shaved head raised her megaphone. "That is right. Submit. Acknowledge your complicity in imperialism and white supremacy." That is when Margaret's fingers stopped. They hovered over the pin, that small piece of metal that represented everything she had left of David. She remembered him giving it to her at the airport in 1971, still in his uniform, 21 years old, and already looking ancient from what he had seen. She remembered him crying in her arms at night for the first year home. The nightmares, the guilt, the way he poured all that pain into becoming a teacher because he wanted to build instead of destroy. She remembered his funeral, the flag folded over his coffin, the 3 rifle shots that made her flinch, the weight of that flag in her arms. This pin was his legacy, his promise that service mattered, that sacrifice for something bigger than yourself mattered, that honor and duty were not just words. And this Antifa thug, this coward hiding behind a mask and a mob, wanted her to throw it away like garbage. Her voice came out stronger this time, still quiet but with steel underneath. "No." The Antifa militant's smile vanished. "What did you just say?" Margaret looked him in the eye. This angry boy playing dress-up revolutionary. and repeated herself. "No, I will not take it off. You can scream, you can threaten, you can post whatever you want, but this pin stays on my chest until they put me in the ground next to my husband." The parking lot went silent. Even the teenagers stopped laughing. The Antifa militant's face went red, then purple, veins bulging in his neck. His hand released her wrist and shot toward her collar, fingers reaching for the pin. "I will rip it off myself then, you fascist!" His fingers were an inch away when the world exploded. The roar of the diesel engine was so sudden, so impossibly loud, that everyone in a 50-foot radius jumped like they had been shocked. The massive black Ford F-150 did not enter the parking lot. It attacked it, tires screaming, suspension groaning under lifted weight. The truck came in so fast it looked like it was airborne. The custom grille gleamed like chrome teeth. The hood sat higher than a grown man's head. This was not a vehicle. This was a weapon, and it was aimed directly at the cluster of Antifa militants surrounding Margaret. They scattered like rats. The lead militant released Margaret and threw himself sideways, hitting the asphalt hard enough to skin his palms. The woman with the megaphone stumbled backward over her own feet and went down, her bandana coming loose. The one filming dropped his phone and ran, his black tactical boots slapping pavement as he sprinted for the far end of the lot. The F-150 stopped exactly where they had been standing, so close to Margaret she could feel the heat radiating off the engine block, could smell the diesel fumes, could feel the vibration of that idling beast in her chest. For 3 eternal seconds, nothing happened. The truck just sat there growling, a predator that had caught its prey and was deciding whether to strike. The Antifa militants were frozen 10 feet away, breathing hard, their masks askew, their confidence evaporated by 2 tons of American steel. Then the driver's door opened. Jake did not step down from that truck. He dropped, and when his boots hit the pavement the impact was audible. 330 pounds of pure muscle. 6 foot 7 inches of controlled violence. Shoulders so broad they barely fit through the doorframe. Arms that looked like they had been carved from granite by an angry god. He wore a gray tank top drenched in sweat from his training session, and every muscle was visible, defined. A roadmap of power that made the Antifa militant look like a malnourished child. Jake's neck was thicker than most men's thighs. His forearms were corded with veins like steel cables. His hands, when he flexed them unconsciously, were the size of dinner plates. These were hands that had deadlifted 953 pounds, hands that had pressed a 400-pound log overhead for reps, hands that had won 3 national strongman championships, and a reputation as someone you did not disrespect, ever, under any circumstances. His face was utterly, terrifyingly calm. No rage, no shouting, just cold calculation. The expression of a man who had already won and was just waiting for his opponent to realize it. Jake looked at his mother first, saw her pressed against her car, saw the tears on her face, saw the red marks on her wrist where she had been grabbed, saw the pin on her collar, his father's pin, the symbol of everything their family had built and bled for. Then he turned his head, slowly, mechanically, and looked at the lead Antifa militant. The militant was trying to stand, trying to brush off the asphalt dust, trying to reclaim some shred of the authority he had possessed 30 seconds ago. He pulled his bandana down, revealing a thin face with patchy facial hair and eyes that were trying very hard to look defiant. "You need to back the hell off, man. We were having a conversation. This is assault. I will call the cops. I have rights." Jake started walking, not fast, slow, deliberate. Each footstep sounded like a judge's gavel hitting wood. Boom, boom, boom. The Antifa militant took 1 step backward, then another. Then he tried to stand his ground, tried to puff out his chest, tried to remember all the YouTube videos he had watched about standing up to fascist aggression. "I am not afraid of you. You think your muscles mean anything? You think." Jake was suddenly there, moving faster than physics should allow for a man his size, and he slapped the phone out of the militant's hand. Not a punch, not a grab, just a casual backhand slap, the way you might swat a mosquito. The phone flew 15 feet and shattered against the concrete. The Antifa militant's eyes went wide. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Jake leaned down, bringing his face to within inches of the smaller man's, and when he spoke his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried across the entire parking lot. "You put your hands on my mother." The Antifa militant tried to back away, but Jake matched him step for step, hurting him, controlling him, making him feel like prey. Behind the militant, His two companions were not moving to help. The woman had pulled her knees to her chest and was sitting on the ground like a child in timeout. The one who had been filming was gone, vanished between the parked cars. Around them, the parking lot crowd had transformed. The cowards who had ignored Margaret's plight were still keeping their distance, but others had emerged. A group of construction workers in hard hats and reflective vests had formed up near the store entrance, arms crossed, faces hard, watching the Antifa militant like wolves watching a wounded deer. An elderly man in a VFW cap was standing beside his pickup truck, one hand over his heart, the other clenched in a fist. The teenagers who had been laughing were silent now, their phones still out, but their expressions changed from mockery to fear. And most importantly, at least 30 phones were recording. All pointed at the Antifa militant. He was the content now. He was the victim. The script had flipped, and he knew it. Jake straightened to his full height, making the militant crane his neck back just to make eye contact. You wanted attention? You wanted to make a statement? You got it. Now everyone is watching. Everyone is recording. And they are going to see exactly what happens when you Antifa cowards pick on someone who cannot fight back. The militant's voice cracked when he tried to respond. We were exercising our First Amendment rights. We were protesting fascism. She is wearing a symbol of. Jake's hand shot out and grabbed the front of the militant's black hoodie, lifting him onto his tiptoes like he weighed nothing. The fabric bunched in Jake's fist, and the militant made a strangled sound. Jake's voice was still quiet, but it had an edge now, like a blade sliding out of a sheath. You were terrorizing a 73-year-old woman over a piece of metal she wears to remember her dead husband. That is what you were doing. Not protesting. Not activism. Bullying. The militant's hands came up, grabbing Jake's wrist, trying to pry those fingers loose. It was like trying to bend steel. Jake held him there for 5 seconds that felt like 5 hours, then released him with a small shove that sent the militant stumbling backward. He caught himself on a parked car, breathing hard, his eyes darting around looking for escape routes that did not exist. Jake took another step forward and the militant flinched. That flinch, that involuntary recoil, was captured by every camera in the parking lot. The big bad Antifa revolutionary reduced to cowering. Jake's voice rose now, not to a shout, but to something that carried authority, that demanded attention. Let me tell you what that pin represents. That pin represents my father, David Chen, who got drafted at 19 and went to Vietnam because his country called, who saw his friends die, who did things that gave him nightmares for 30 years afterward, who came home to people like you spitting on him, calling him a baby killer, throwing things at him in airports. And you know what he did? He did not become bitter. He did not hurt anyone. He became a high school teacher. He taught American history for 23 years in an inner-city school. He coached basketball. He volunteered at the VA helping other veterans deal with their trauma. He showed up every day and tried to make the world better than he found it. That is what sacrifice looks like. That is what honor looks like. The construction workers started clapping. Slow at first, then faster, then others joined in. The veteran was nodding, his eyes wet. A woman in nursing scrubs had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The applause grew louder, a wave of sound that drowned out everything else. Jake pointed at the Antifa militant. What do you sacrifice? What do you build? You spend your time attacking strangers in parking lots. You hide behind masks because you are too cowardly to show your face. You travel in groups because alone you are nothing. You call it activism, but it is just bullying with a political excuse. You are not fighting fascism. You are not resisting tyranny. You are just a sad, angry kid taking out your frustrations on people who cannot fight back. The militant was shaking now, his whole body trembling. He tried to speak, but his voice came out as a squeak. We are trying to stop. Jake cut him off. Stop what? Stop an old woman from honoring her husband? Stop people from being proud of their country? Stop anyone who disagrees with you from existing in public? You are not stopping fascism. You are practicing it. The woman Antifa militant on the ground tried to stand up, tried to say something. Jake's head snapped toward her and she froze mid-motion, then slowly sat back down. She pulled her bandana up higher, trying to hide her face, but it was too late. The cameras had her. Jake turned back to the lead militant. You know what the difference is between you and my father? My father fought against actual evil, against people who were trying to hurt innocents, and when he came home, he built things, he created, he taught, he served. You just destroy, you tear down, you attack, you make people afraid to wear a pin, to speak their mind, to exist without your permission. That is not revolution. That is terrorism. The parking lot was completely silent now except for Jake's voice. Even the traffic on the nearby road seemed to have quieted, like the universe itself was listening. The lead Antifa militant's legs were visibly shaking. His hands were up in a defensive posture. He looked at Jake, then at the crowd, then at the cameras, and reality crashed down on him all at once. He was not untouchable. The mob was not with him. The people were not on his side. He was alone, exposed, and facing consequences for the first time in his radicalized life. His voice came out as a whimper. "I want to leave. Just let me leave." Jake shook his head slowly. "No, not yet. You wanted to make my mother apologize. You wanted to humiliate her on camera. Now it is your turn." The militant's eyes went wide. "No, I am not." Jake took one step forward and the militant broke. He turned and ran, just bolted, his black clothes flapping, his boots slapping against pavement, running like his life depended on it. He made it maybe 20 feet before he tripped over a speed bump he did not see and went sprawling, hitting the asphalt face first. The crowd gasped. Jake walked toward him, still not hurrying, still in complete control. The militant scrambled to his feet, blood running from his nose where he had hit the ground, and kept running. But Jake was hurting him again, angling his approach to drive the militant toward the far corner of the lot, where a concrete loading dock created a dead end. The construction workers had moved too, forming a loose perimeter, making sure there was no escape. The veteran was following at a distance, his face set in grim satisfaction. The woman in scrubs was filming. The teenagers were filming. Everyone was filming. The Antifa militant hit the wall, literally, his back slamming against the concrete barrier. He spun around and found Jake 10 feet away and closing, found the crowd behind Jake, found cameras everywhere. He slid down the wall into a sitting position, his legs giving out completely, and put his hands over his face. "Please, please do not hurt me. I am sorry. I am sorry. Just let me go." Jake stopped 5 feet away, crossed his arms, looked down at this pathetic figure who had been so bold, so righteous, so certain of his moral superiority minutes ago. Now you are sorry. Now, when there are consequences. Where was this sorry when you had my mother trapped against her car? Where was this fear when you were screaming in her face about fascism? The militant was crying now, real tears mixing with the blood from his nose. "I did not mean. We were just. The pin represents," Jake's voice cut like a whip. "The pin represents my father's grave. It represents my mother's grief. It represents every person who believed that protecting the weak was worth dying for. And you Antifa coward, you do not get to tell her she cannot honor that. You do not get to put your hands on her. You do not get to terrorize her in broad daylight and then cry when someone finally stands up to you." The crowd was pressing closer now, a wall of witnesses, a jury delivering a verdict. The construction workers were stone-faced. The veteran had his phone out, making sure to get a clear shot of the militant's face. A woman shouted, "You should be ashamed." A man's voice called, "Remember this next time you want to play revolutionary." Jake looked at the crowd and held out his hand. "Someone give me a phone." 3 people stepped forward immediately, offering their devices. Jake took the nearest one and pointed it at the militant. "You are going to record an apology. To my mother, to everyone in this parking lot, to everyone watching. And it better be real because this is going on every platform that exists." The militant looked up through his tears and blood, saw that phone pointed at him, saw his face about to be broadcast to the world, and something inside him broke completely. He was not a freedom fighter anymore, not a resistor, not a revolutionary. He was just a terrified kid who had picked the wrong target and was about to become a cautionary tale. His voice came out broken, hitching with sobs. "I am sorry. I am so sorry to the woman, to Margaret. I should not have touched you. I should not have yelled. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Your pin, your husband, you have every right. I am a coward. I am a bully. I hide behind Antifa and a mask because I am weak. I am nothing. Please forgive me." Jake kept the camera steady. "What else? What are you going to do now?" The militant covered his face with his bloody hands. "I am going to post this everywhere. I am going to show people what I did. I am going to stop. I am going to quit Antifa. I am done. I cannot do this anymore." Jake filmed for another 10 seconds, making sure to capture the militant's complete breakdown, then lowered the phone. He looked at the crowd. "Anyone else get that?" 20 hands went up. 20 voices confirmed they had recorded everything. Jake nodded and looked back down at the militant. "You post that video on every Antifa channel, Every social media account you have. You do not delete it. You do not make excuses. You let everyone in your movement see what happens when you terrorize innocent people. And if I ever hear about you doing something like this again, if I ever see your face at another one of these Antifa mob attacks, I will not stop at words. Do you understand me?" The militant nodded so frantically it looked like his head might come off. "Can I go, please?" Jake stepped aside. The militant scrambled to his feet, keeping his back against the wall, and edged sideways until he was clear. Then he ran, this time with the crowd parting but not to help him, to let him flee in shame. Someone shouted good riddance. Another voice yelled, "Tell your Antifa friends what happens when you mess with real Americans." The woman Antifa militant who had been sitting on the ground took her chance and bolted too, running in the opposite direction, her megaphone forgotten on the pavement. Within seconds, both of them were gone, disappeared into the surrounding neighborhood, their revolution abandoned the moment it faced real resistance. Jake walked back through the parking lot and the construction workers clapped him on the shoulders. The veteran saluted him, a crisp military salute that Jake returned with respect. The woman in scrubs was saying, "Thank you, God bless you, thank you." The teenagers who had been mocking Margaret earlier were silent, shamefaced, one of them actually apologizing to her directly. Margaret had been watching everything from beside her car, her hand still pressed to her collar, still touching that pin. When Jake reached her, she looked up at her son, this mountain of a man who had his father's strength and his father's heart, and she started crying again. But these were different tears, tears of relief, of pride, of love. Jake wrapped his arms around her carefully like she was made of glass and let her sob into his chest while the crowd applauded. 2 police officers arrived 10 minutes later, called by someone in the store. They took statements from a dozen witnesses, all telling the same story. 3 Antifa militants had assaulted an elderly woman. Her son had intervened. The militants had fled. No charges against Jake. The officers looked at the blood drops on the pavement where the militant had face planted, looked at Jake's massive frame, looked at Margaret's wrist still showing red marks, and one of them said off the record, "Good. We are tired of these Antifa punks thinking they own the streets." The other officer shook Jake's hand. "Your father would be proud." By sunset, the video was everywhere. Not the video the Antifa militants had planned to post, the one where they humiliated Margaret. The video of their leaders sobbing, bleeding, apologizing, admitting he was a coward. The video of Jake's speech about sacrifice and honor. The video of the crowd turning on the Antifa bullies and witnessing their complete defeat. Within hours, it had 1 million views. By the next morning, 10 million. News outlets picked it up. Conservative commentators played it on repeat. The Antifa militant's face was identified within 6 hours. His name, his address, his college, his part-time job at a coffee shop, all posted online. He tried to delete his social media, but screenshots lived forever. His college issued a statement condemning political violence. The coffee shop fired him. His Antifa cell disavowed him, claiming he had acted alone, that he did not represent their values. The woman with the megaphone posted a tearful apology video from her parents' basement, claiming she had been radicalized online and was seeking therapy. But the damage was done, not just to them, but to the Antifa movement in that city. Their aura of invincibility was shattered. Their tactics of intimidation were exposed as empty theater. People were not afraid anymore. Margaret did not watch much of the coverage. She went home that evening, made herself tea, and sat in David's old recliner. She touched the pin on her collar and whispered to her husband like she did every night, "You should have seen your boy today, David. He stood up for me. He stood up for you, for everything we believe in." And tomorrow, she knew, she would wear the pin again. She would go out into the world again. Because that is what you do when you have honor. You do not let Antifa thugs make you ashamed. You do not hide who you are. You stand. Jake went back to his gym that night and trained harder than he had in months. His coach asked why he was smiling during a brutal deadlift session. Jake just shook his head and pulled. The Antifa militant, whose name was irrelevant because he represented thousands like him, eventually left town, moved across the country, changed his appearance, but he never forgot that parking lot, never forgot the feeling of being backed into that corner, of his movement abandoning him, of realizing that the real world does not care about your ideology when you cross certain lines. And Margaret's pin, that small piece of metal that had survived Vietnam, and David's death, and the Antifa attack, caught the lamplight in her quiet house. It would survive whatever came next, because some symbols matter, some values endure, and sometimes When evil raises its masked face and thinks it can terrorize the innocent without consequence, a 330-pound strongman climbs out of an F-150 and reminds everyone what real strength looks like. Not the strength to attack the weak, the strength to protect them. That was justice, that was America, and that was why the pin would never come off.